So you're thinking of moving to Vancouver? You know it's an expensive city, but really, how does that relate to every day? I mean, it's obvious it's expensive. Everybody knows that. One of the most expensive cities in North America, second most expensive in Canada. But how does that relate to your budget, your lifestyle, and what does it mean for you when you move to this city? That's what I'm going to try and help you understand. I'm a lifelong resident. I was born and raised here. I have 4 kids. So I'm going to give you the perspective of what it's like as an individual, as a couple, but also as a family. Stay tuned. Check out this video. It's all here for you. I got you. Hit that subscribe button. Click a like. That's the only way you're going to check out all of my future videos. And it's the only way that other people just like you are going to be able to see these videos. Incomes aren't incredibly high. So the average income, and the number that I have is for 2020, but the average income for an individual is $62,250. That's just over $4,000 a month. And for a family, the average income is $114,900, which is just over $7,000 a month. Minimum wage went up in 2022. Minimum wage now is $15.65. But if you're full-time working minimum wage, you are not making enough to really get by in the city of Vancouver. Really, those average incomes are roughly about what you need to have a decent lifestyle in Vancouver. So it's no secret that housing is expensive in Vancouver. It's basically going to be the most expensive part of your budget. And most people in Vancouver are spending roughly 40 to 50% of their monthly budget on housing. That changes over time if you've owned property in Vancouver for a long period. But in general, most people just getting into the city are looking at putting about that much money into housing. I'm going to cover rent as well as home ownership. And so first off, let's talk about typical rentals. I'm also talking specifically about the city of Vancouver. So I'm going to start with numbers that are for the downtown core or very close to the downtown core of the city of Vancouver. Those prices change as you get further away from the downtown core, as it would pretty much anywhere else. But first of all, 1-bedroom apartments. You're looking at rents around $2,500 a month. 2 bedrooms, around $3,500 a month. And 3 bedrooms, if you can find them, they're rare. More typical that you would find them in a townhouse or a half duplex than you would an apartment or a condominium or an actual house. But you're looking roughly around $4,500 a month. Now, there's also another option. As I just mentioned, when you're looking for something larger, you sort of have to look at other options aside from apartments, but basement suites are an option if you're looking to find something that's a little more budget conscious. Many people in Vancouver are renting out their basements, and some are dingy and dark. Others are quite nice. So if you want to, I would say you're looking at maybe a 20% discount for a basement suite over an apartment. And another thing that people do when they're renting to try and save a little money, it's become more and more common as the city becomes more and more expensive, and that would be to share accommodation. And so, years ago, 20-year-olds, as they're going through university, that's what they're doing. They're living with 5 other people in the same house. These days, it's more common that you see 30-year-olds doing the same thing, trying to make the city a little more affordable. All right. So now, what's it like to own property in Vancouver? There's lots of different property types. Obviously, there's apartments, there's townhouses, and there's houses. Those are the main key housing types that we have. Large apartments are not super common. So if you're a family, your options are typically going to be more in the townhouse and house direction than they would in the apartment, unless you want to squeeze people in to 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, that type of thing. A 1-bedroom condo in downtown Vancouver these days, and I'm talking right now in March of 2023, I want to give you a caveat that prices do change. If you're looking at this at some point in the future, you're going to need to talk to me to figure out, what are the prices like at that point. But right now in downtown Vancouver, a 1-bedroom condo would be roughly $700,000. This would be a typical property that is in good condition. That would be worth buying for the long term. A 2-bedroom condo, $900,000 roughly. and a 3-bedroom option, which would typically be a townhouse. As I mentioned in the rental section, you're not finding too many 3-bedroom condos. So most likely a townhouse or a half duplex, but you're looking at about 1.3 million as a typical number. And then finally for a house, you're looking at about 1.7 million. And that again is just kind of a typical house, nothing special, probably needs a bit of work. But yes, roughly 1.7 million. Now, to give you an idea of what that looks like for your budget, a monthly budget, let's assume you've bought something in the $1.2 million range. That would require a $240,000 down payment. It would be the 5.2% 5-year fixed rate, which is roughly where interest rates are at the moment. That would be roughly $5,500 a month. It's $56.70 per month. So obviously renting in Vancouver is a little cheaper than purchasing, but the benefit of purchasing is that you secure your home, you secure it against future rental increases and prevent yourself from being kicked out by landlords that are doing renovations or deciding that they want to move in themselves or selling the property. Many people choose to own so that they can protect themselves from that future uncertainty. Another thing to know, I mentioned these prices are all specific to the downtown core. Obviously, the further we go outside of the downtown core, if we're looking at some of the proximate suburbs like North Vancouver, Burnaby, Richmond, going a little further, you find Coquitlam, New Westminster, Port Coquitlam, Surrey, Langley. Prices go down from 20% down to 40% the further you go. Now, of course, you pay for that in commuting time and commuting costs, but we're going to talk about that in subsequent sections. I'm running a poll. What luxury item can't you do without? Comment below. For me personally, it would be an Americano Misto. I love me an Americano Misto. And there's so many amazing coffee places to spend my money in Vancouver. I'm still searching for the perfect one, but I want to know, what luxury item can't you do without? Let me know below. Transportation is another big budget item, and you're basically in one of two camps. Either you have a car or you don't have a car. And Vancouver is small enough that you can actually function without a vehicle. And there's lots of great options if that's what you want to do. It's challenging as a family. As an individual, I think it's more likely that it's something that you can do, or as a family, you can individually make those choices. But I've broken this down into the no car and the car. All right. So no car. We got a transit pass. Vancouver's broken up into 3 zones, and depending on how far you go on a transit, that's how much you have to pay. So every month, a 1-zone transit pass would be $105. And for 3 zones, the furthest that you would go, it is $185. Excellent value. Subway system, SkyTrain system is incredibly efficient in this city. I highly recommend anybody that's moving here get one of those, especially as they're just trying to figure out the city. Now, another option with transit is the West Coast Express. That's not something you're going to need if you live in the city. It's not going to be something that is useful to you, even if you live in some of the closer suburbs. But if you end up moving out further east into some of the further suburbs, you might want to rely on using the West Coast Express. And the West Coast Express costs, depending on how far you're going, from $220 a month up to $360 for the furthest trips. And that can save you a lot of money in housing expenses if you're moving further into the suburbs, deeper where the West Coast Express goes. But obviously, if you're doing that, you need to pay more to get into the city. Car share is another thing that's incredibly popular. This would be more common in the city core. It's roughly 50 cents a minute, $18 an hour, or, got to double check this, $105 a day. So that's a great option. Where I live, just outside the city center, Evo is the main provider of car share, and these cars are sprinkled through all the neighborhoods. You could always find one if you needed. So even if you don't have a car, you can get a car if you really need one. And membership is free, which is also excellent. We have taxis, of course, Ubers, and Lyft. All of that. Uber and Lyft came only recently. We were a late addition to the system, but I think most people in Vancouver are incredibly happy that we don't only have to rely on taxis. So taxis start at $3.75. That's sort of the base fare. And then it's roughly $2 a kilometer. Uber and Lyft, we understand how that works, right? It's surge pricing, depends on how far you're going, where you're going, that type of time of day, how busy it is. There's also bike share. It's called Mobi in Vancouver. It's 25 cents a minute. There's a $3 minimum, but you can also buy a yearly pass. And for a 30-minute trip, it's just $100. And I think for an hour trip, it's $120. That's also a great network, only for closer areas into the downtown core, but an excellent option if you just want to sort of use Evo, the subway, SkyTrain system, and bikes to get around. You can definitely do that. And aside from the bike share, I should mention the city of Vancouver is a very walkable city. It's a very bikeable city. We do have quite a few hills. It does get cold. It does rain, but you do see a lot of people making use of our bike lanes, which not everybody is incredibly happy about, but they are useful in helping to make it a safe city to be biking in. And it's a good city to be biking and walking year round, pretty much. Owning a car. It's expensive in Vancouver. There's many parts of owning a car that make it expensive. Right now, gas is just under $2 a liter. And I think it's $1.90 a liter. Roughly, 38% of that is tax. We are the most expensive place in Canada for gasoline. So the greater Vancouver area has the same tax level, and you'll see prices are all the same. So around $2, you're getting about 75 cents of that are taxes. Adds up pretty quickly and makes driving expensive. This is one of the cities where you see electric vehicles being incredibly popular. They've boomed in the last few years. A lot of people are motivated to make that change, both for environmental reasons, but also for budget reasons. So you see a lot of that around the city. Parking is also expensive. It depends on the area of the city, exactly where you're parking. But you can see from 50 cents an hour up to $7 an hour, the most expensive parking. Some people they'll rent monthly spots, and you can rent those in the downtown core for around $200, $250 a month, if that's something that you need. And then car insurance. Typical car insurance, it's a bit hard to give you precise numbers for car insurance, but BC is not cheap for car insurance. It has gotten a little bit cheaper, but a typical average car insurance in BC in Vancouver, I should say, is roughly $2,100 a year, which works out to about $175 a month. The longer you drive, the safer you drive, the cheaper that becomes. But many people find, especially the younger people with nicer vehicles, those insurance costs could go up to $3,000 a month or even higher. So every single day I hear from people just like you that are thinking about moving to Vancouver. They've called me, texted me, reached out in some way after seeing these videos, and they know that I can help them and I can help you. If you're in that position, thinking of moving to Vancouver, call, text, email me whenever. I've got your back. I'm here. I'm ready. And I would love to help you. Reach out anytime. Childcare. Let's just talk about the expense first of all. So they've come down a lot in the last year, roughly. The provincial government has subsidized daycares, both licensed and unlicensed, to make them much more affordable and as a reasonable cost for most working people. And so for toddlers, you're looking at an average of about $21 a day is what the government tells us. So that's roughly $400 a month. And for infants, it's roughly $600 a month. Now, these can vary. It depends on the daycare that you're in, and they can get a little more expensive. But before the subsidies, I was personally paying over $2,000 a month per child for infant care. And it was hard to find. It's aside from the cost of daycare, which, as I said, has become much more reasonable, just finding a place is like winning the lottery. And to tell you a little bit about my own experience, I have 4 children. We sent out to about 30 different daycares, licensed daycares for my son, when he was born. And the only one that we got into is the one that he ended up going to. We didn't have a choice. It was just the one that he got into we needed so that my wife at the time could go back to work. And we were just relieved that we found a spot. But that was the same for all 4 children. And it's not becoming much easier. Spots are very limited. So my advice to you, if you don't have any kids yet, you're coming here with small children that are in daycare, apply to those daycares right away. Do searches online. You can find them. Some you have to pay for, it might be $20, it might be $50 as an application fee, but definitely apply to as many as you can find, and the ones that you like. Education. It can be a big budget item, but it doesn't have to be. Now, there's 2 options, of course. We have public schools and we have private schools. Canada, British Columbia, Vancouver specifically is known for its excellent public education. We have plentiful schools. The systems are slightly different as you work out into the other suburbs. But in the city of Vancouver, schools are plentiful. You can walk to school. My kid's school is about 5 blocks from where I live, and that's not unusual. Every neighborhood has a couple of elementary schools and basically at least one high school, often more than one high school. Where I grew up, there were actually 3 high schools that I could have walked to. Where I am now, there's 2 high schools. So they're cheap, they're good. Most people are sending their kids to public school, but if you want to send them to private school, that's an option too. And Vancouver has excellent private schools. Their reputations are fantastic, but they're not cheap. And so what you have, typically they're separated by boys and girls. I don't think there's too many co-ed ones, but I do think some of the newer schools, newer private schools can be co-ed. But the most well-known private school for boys would be St. George's. That is $32,000 a year. And then there's also at the other end of the cost spectrum, an excellent boys school called Vancouver College. That would be just shy of $9,000 a year, $8,900. For girls, Crofton House is sort of the preeminent girls private school. And you also have to pay dearly for that. It's $29,300. I went to an elementary school directly beside Crofton House Elementary. And what I remember most being in grade 3 and 4 at the time was delighting in throwing snowballs at the girls in their uniforms on the other side of the fence. They didn't like us much, and I can't blame them. And then at the other end of that cost spectrum, another excellent girls private school is Little Flower Academy, and that is $8,500 a year. So you can find either option, private or public. You won't make a mistake. They're all excellent, all good. Groceries, another big item, especially if you have a family. This one was tough because it is fairly subjective what people buy. Vancouver isn't cheap when it comes to groceries, but there are cheaper options and luxurious options. So we have all types of grocery stores in the city, but being on the coast, getting food here is a little expensive, coming up from California or coming from other parts of Canada or other parts of the world. So that doesn't make our groceries particularly cheap. As an individual, I would say, typical grocery bills would be in the $300 to $400 range. Again, obviously, if you're eating only noodles, only pasta, not buying meat, not buying produce out of season, you're going to find ways that you can make that much cheaper and save money. But I'm trying to give you an idea, not the complete budget conscious option. I would say is more in that 300 plus range. As a family, 4 people, I think you're looking in the $1,000 to $1,200 range. Obviously, depending on how many teenage boys you have and how much food your children waste. I have to say my children waste a lot of food and it horrifies me. They're so young. You make them dinner, they say they want one thing and then they don't want it anymore. And then you have to give them something else so that they actually eat. But yeah, we throw out more food, I'm ashamed to admit, than we really should, which adds to my grocery bill. Eating out, restaurants. Vancouver has a lot of restaurants. Every neighborhood has an abundance of options. And, not every place is fantastic, but it's a very competitive market for restaurants. And the bar is pretty high for good restaurants. So at every, maybe other than fast food, but at every price point, you can find good quality if you seek it out. If you want some tips on that, give me a call. But so a typical fast food meal in Vancouver is roughly $15. An inexpensive restaurant meal would be around $20 per person. A mid-range meal would be roughly $50. And then a nice restaurant, high-end meal, no booze, you're looking around $100. Maybe there's one drink in there, maybe a dessert, but looking at roughly $100. You can definitely spend a lot more. There's, options to spend hundreds of dollars on a single meal per person. And once you get alcohol involved, thousands, and you can have a fantastic night out in Vancouver. Utilities. This is going to depend a lot on the space that you have, of course. If you're living in a studio apartment versus 3,000 square foot house, your utility use is going to vary widely. But one thing that I can say is Vancouver is actually one area that it is relatively affordable is utilities. Typical electricity bill is about $120, and that is about a third less than the national average. So electricity is definitely something that we have a lot of, and we don't charge a lot for. There's one provider, it's BC Hydro, and most of the places that you're going to be living in are going to need, every place is going to require electricity for the lights. Not every place is going to be heated with electricity, but if you have baseboard electric heaters, obviously that will be the case. Now, the way that many places are heated, if it's not electricity, is gas, natural gas. And a typical natural gas bill is about $100 a month. Again, it's not a crazy expense in Vancouver. Now, a few reasons for this, I think, are that generally natural gas isn't that expensive, but also we don't need to heat to extremes and we don't need to cool to extremes. So an average of about $100 is pretty reasonable through the year. Internet is about $100 a month. I mean, you could find it for $50 if you want a slower version. Around 80 would probably be, maybe I should say 80, not 100. It's 80, an average of 80. But yeah, your internet is pretty much the same as it will be all across the country unless you head north. I'm going to break this down from here between owning and renting. There are some unique expenses for each of them. For owning, there's the property taxes, municipal property taxes. And every city has its own municipal tax rate. So what I'm going to talk about right here is just the city of Vancouver. It doesn't have the highest rate, but because it values, the absolute amount that you end up paying is higher than many of the surrounding suburbs. So for the city of Vancouver, it's $3.83 in 2023 per $1,000 of value. And that works out for that property that you bought when we first talked about housing at 1.2 million. That would actually work out to $383 per month in property taxes. And then there's maintenance costs. Now, if you own a home, there's no forced maintenance. But if you own a strata, if you live in a condo or a townhouse, for that $1.2 million property, you're probably looking around $400 to $500 a month in strata maintenance fees. Now, if you rent, the one thing that I want to point out is that you are able to find properties that may not require you to pay utilities. In some cases, some utilities or all utilities will be included. So if you rent in a building that's owned by a corporation, not an individually owned strata condo, those older buildings quite often have heat and hot water included in maintenance, included in your rent. And if you rent a basement suite, quite often the owners of the house will include the utilities and perhaps even internet in your monthly rent. So that's another reason, another way that you can get the cost of housing down as a tenant. And now finally, leisure and entertainment. There's all sorts of things we could possibly cover here. I'm just going to pick a few so you know sort of typical costs in Vancouver. First of all, a night out at the movies averages around $15 a ticket. Second one, a latte. I love coffee. There's plenty of good places to get a really good coffee in Vancouver, but you're going to be paying about $6. If you want to make it a little fancier, if you want oat milk in there, you want some flavor, it's going to get up $7, $8, but $6 for a pretty standard regular size latte in Vancouver. At a bar, go out for a night, have a drink, have a beer. You're looking at about $15 for the drink, $15 to $20, $8 to $10 probably for that beer. And then after you have your drink, you want to go out to some sporting event. Well, lucky enough, in Vancouver, we have four professional sports teams. Sorry, I actually forgot one of them. But you have the NHL's Vancouver Canucks, you have the CFL's BC Lions, and you have the Vancouver Whitecaps in the MLS, and then you have baseball at Nat Bailey with the Vancouver Canadians. But the most expensive option would be going out to see a Canucks game. Cheapest ticket there, you're looking about $50 to $60 for a ticket in the nosebleeds. You can be paying hundreds of dollars for the tickets right up behind the bench, first row type of thing. A fun night for a family is going to see a Whitecaps game. Those tickets are considerably cheaper, $32 a ticket for a decent ticket. And an even more fun under the radar thing for families to do is going to a Vancouver Canadians game. Nat Bailey Stadium is really close to where I live. It's the greatest ballpark you'll ever visit. Beautiful summer's evening. There's nothing better that you can be doing. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I love going to Nat Bailey and catching a game. Tickets are only $20. There's all sorts of fun things to do and a great place to take kids as well. Speaking of kids, let's talk about some family activities. Pretty typical standard things for young families to have to do with their kids is go to Science World and go to the aquarium. And their standard, where the deal is to get an annual pass. An annual pass for Science World is $242 a year. And for the aquarium is $165 a year. I highly recommend getting one or both for those rainy weekend night or weekend days where the kids are kind of going crazy and you just want to get them out of the house. Science World is a great place to let them run around. And the aquarium has amazing displays, a really interesting place, all sorts of stuff to do and see there at the aquarium. Highly recommend both of those. I just want, for those of you that are families and have kids, to have an idea of what it's like for kids' activities in Vancouver. Similar to the childcare topic, it is tough to get them into pretty much anything in this city, and it's not that cheap. And here's an idea for you. Soccer for a 7-year-old this past season, which is, I don't know, a 5-month season, I think, is $500 a season. A gymnastics program, 6-week gymnastics program, again, for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, is about $400 for that 6-week program. Swimming lessons, you're looking, that's through the community center, which is generally cheaper than going through most private options, would be $60 per program. Now, you could go private and then you're paying about $400 for a swimming program through a private company. And finally, summer camps. Again, through the community center programs, they're roughly $150 to $200 a week. And if you go private, some sort of specialty program, you're looking at $300 to $500 a week. Things like baseball or soccer or gymnastics camps. So quite a spread there. But again, very competitive to get into. You want to book early. These things all are a little bit cheaper as you end up going out to the outer suburbs as well. This channel is all about Vancouver. That's all I do. Every week, there's going to be a new video. You don't want to miss it. Click subscribe if you haven't done it. Click the little bell and the like, the thumbs up, and especially the thumbs up so that everybody else knows all about this. People just like you, they want to get this kind of quality content too. I'm hearing from people every day that are wanting to move to this city, and I absolutely love it. I love helping people find the right fit in their new home. If that's you, this is my contact information. Be sure to reach out anytime. Call, text, email, whatever you want to do. I'm here for you. I got your back if you're moving to Vancouver.